The razor trembled in the drifter's hand, its nickel blade catching the lantern light as the wind shoved dust through the cracked washroom window. Water dripped from the tin basin in slow, heavy beats. The room was quiet, too quiet, until the door slammed open hard enough to rattle the walls. Elias Turner filled the doorway like a storm cloud. His boots scraped the floor once, then stopped. His shadow swallowed the drifter, long and sharp across the wooden boards. The air tightened. The lantern flame flickered as if it feared him. The drifter froze mid-motion, the razor still hovering inches from his cheek. Elias's voice scraped out like gravel dragged across stone. "Shave and you die." The razor slipped in the drifter's grip. The sound of metal tapping porcelain echoed like a hammer strike. Footsteps gathered outside. Boots on stairs, hushed voices, the saloon's hallway turning into a corridor of onlookers peering in through the doorway. Elias didn't glance at them. His eyes stayed locked on the razor. He took a single step forward. Boards creaked. Dust rose. The lanterns swung slightly, shadows jumping like frightened animals along the walls. The drifter's breath came sharp and shallow. I just needed a trim," he whispered, voice cracking. Elias didn't blink. Not here. Not with that. His jaw clenched, scar running pale beneath the stubble on his cheek. The side of the razor seemed to pull something dark up from inside him, some old hurt that twisted behind his eyes. A startled gasp rose from a woman in the hallway. Someone whispered the rancher's name with a tremble. Another muttered, "God help the boy." Elias reached out, not to grab the drifter, but to push the razor down with 2 fingers. Slow, firm, final. The metal clicked against the basin again. He leaned in close, breath steady, voice lower than a warning should be. "You don't know what you're in." Outside, the wind picked up again, slapping dust against the windows. The saloon sign groaned on its rusted chain. Horses stomped nervously below, as if sensing the shift in the air. The drifter swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I didn't mean any trouble." Elias's eyes narrowed. Not with anger, something heavier. Something that weighed down his shoulders and tightened his breath. He stepped back, but only enough to give the drifter a sliver of space. "You didn't," he muttered. "But trouble heard you anyway." The lantern hissed. A gust pushed the door wider, scattering dust between them like ash. Elias's boots turned toward the hall. The crowd parted without a sound, their fear thick enough to choke on. He didn't look at a single face as he walked past them, down the stairs, out into the night where the wind swallowed him. The drifter stood alone in the silent washroom, the razor gleaming on the basin beside him. Behind him, an old voice whispered from the shadows of memory. One of the onlookers, shaking his head as he walked away. "Razor's a cursed thing in this town, not cause of what it does, but what it wakes." The wind answered with a long, lonely howl. Riders appeared first as silhouettes, dark shapes cut against the burning red horizon. Their horses stirred the dust into tall, restless spirals that crept toward Hollow Bend like approaching storms. The sun hung low, bleeding orange across the sky, and the ground trembled beneath hooves long before the town found its voice. A shout rang from the water tower. "Riders!" Canyon side. Doors slammed. Windows snapped shut. Men ducked behind posts, rifles trembling in their hands. The saloon emptied in seconds except for the drifter, who stood on the wooden porch, staring at the rising dust cloud as if it might swallow him whole. The newcomers didn't ride fast. They drifted slow, deliberate, like wolves circling prey. Long black dusters flapped at their sides. The iron brand on their saddlebags glinted when the sun hit it. A jagged red mark burned into the hide. A woman in the street gasped. "Not them. Lord, not again." The drifter felt the fear ripple through the town like a cold wave. Even horses tied along the rails jerked their heads and stomped the dirt, snorting sharp breaths. From behind him, the saloon doors creaked. Elias stepped out. He didn't look at the drifter. He didn't look at the people watching from cracked windows. His gaze locked on the riders miles off, but closing, his jaw tightening as if a rusty hinge shifted inside him. The drifter swallowed. "You know them." Elias didn't answer. Instead, He lifted his hand to shield his eyes from the lowering sun. His fingers shook once, barely, but enough for the drifter to notice. The wind shifted. Voices from inside the saloon floated out, half whispered, half prayed. Marauders. Thought they were gone. Burned his ranch, killed. Don't say it too loud. The riders halted on a ridge overlooking the town. Their leader, tall, hunched, wrapped in dust, raised a spyglass. The glass glinted. Elias stiffened. The drifter stepped back, heart thudding. They're looking at him. No one disagreed. The riders didn't move for several long breaths. They just watched, silent, patient, measuring the town like butchers studying livestock. Then, as slowly as they'd come, they turned their horses and rode along the canyon edge, leaving a long trail of dust behind them. The town exhaled all at once. But Elias didn't. He stared until the last speck of dust vanished. Only then did his shoulders drop a fraction. The drifter's voice shook. Why are they here? Elias didn't look his way. He spoke to the horizon, to the disappearing dust, to the ghosts walking with the riders. They came to finish what they started. The drifter felt a chill crawl along his spine. The wind picked up again, dragging the saloon sign into a low groan. Far off, the canyon spat back an echo, a hollow, distant cry that sounded almost human. Elias stepped off the porch, boots crunching gravel. Night falls close, he muttered. Trouble follow it. He didn't wait for the drifter to follow, but the drifter did, because the town's fear now moved with a face and a name, and both were riding back with the wind. Elias Turner, the Marauders, and whatever unfinished business lay between them. Torches flared against the morning darkness, their flames whipping sideways in the wind as riders poured into Hollow Bend from every direction. The ground shook beneath pounding hooves. Dogs barked. Children screamed. Windows slammed shut like frantic heartbeats. Craven Holt rode at the front. His black duster cracked in the wind, and the silver straight razor in his hand glinted like a shard of lightning as he raised it high. Smoke drifted behind him, dust and fire mixing in the cold dawn air. Elias Turner. Holt's voice ripped across the street, raw and jagged. Come out, or this town burns before the sun's up. Men hid behind barrels, clutching rifles they didn't believe in. Women huddled their children under porches. No one moved toward the street, except Elias. He stepped out of the saloon shadow like he'd been waiting there all night. His boots sank a little into the dust. His hands hung loose at his sides. He never blinked at the torches circling the town or the dozen rifles leveled his way. The drifter watched from behind a wagon, breath shaking, heart hammering loud enough for him to hear it. Craven smirked, razor glinting. There he is, the ghost of a man who wouldn't die proper. He rode forward until he was 10 paces from Elias. Get on your knees. Shave that rat's nest off your face and beg. Rancher. Elias didn't move. The flames from the torches painted hard shadows across his scar, the same scar carved by the razor Craven held. The wind tugged at Elias's beard like it wanted to rip it free itself. The Marauders tightened their circle. Rifles clicked. Horses snorted fog into the cold air. Then Elias turned, not to Craven, not to the gunman, but to the drifter. His voice came low. Come here. The drifter's spine locked. His legs felt like wet sand. But something in Elias's tone, unyielding, steady, pulled him forward. He stepped into the open, tiny against the ring of killers. Craven laughed, deep and ugly. So, you brought me a sacrifice. Ain't that sweet? The drifter's breath hitched. Elias didn't look at him. He raised his hands slowly, palms outward, moving with the calm of a man stepping through rain instead of gunfire. Then, in a single motion, he reached forward, fast enough to make horses rear, and snatched the razor right out of Craven Holt's grip. Gasps burst from every throat. Rifles lifted. Fingers tightened. Craven's eyes widened. What are you? But Elias wasn't listening. He lifted the razor to his own beard. The blade pressed his skin. The first scrape echoed like steel against bone. A long line of beard fell to the dirt. Then another, and another. The town watched in frozen silence as Elias sheared away the years he'd hidden under. When the last strip of hair dropped, sunlight caught the bare skin at his neck, revealing the ink beneath. A bold military tattoo, the mark of the U.S. Frontier Scouts. Craven's smirk died on his lips. Elias closed the razor with a snap that cut through the silence. "Now," he said softly, "we finish this on my terms." Gunfire cracked before Craven could breathe. Elias moved first, faster than anyone expected, faster than a man with his years and scars should have been able to. The moment the first rifle flashed, he dove sideways, rolling through dust as bullets tore splinters from the saloon wall behind him. The town exploded into chaos. Horses reared, screaming. Torches fell, scattering sparks across the ground. The Marauders fired wildly, their shots snapping through the morning air like breaking bones. Elias came up on one knee, a revolver already in his hand. No one saw him draw it. One clean shot dropped the first rider. A second shot rang out, hitting the necks before the man could even turn his rifle. The drifter ducked behind a water trough as a bullet hissed past his ear. He flinched, heart thundering, but when he looked up, he saw Elias weaving through the gunfire with terrifying precision, like he'd rehearsed this fight 100 times in some grim dream. Craven Holt shouted orders, but fear cracked his voice. "Stop him! Stop!" Elias was already there. He slammed into a marauder on horseback, dragging the man down and rolling with him in the dirt. Before the gang member could rise, Elias struck, quick, brutal, efficient. The razor flashed silver as he used it like a knife, dropping two more men with silent, surgical movements. The drifter stared breathless. Elias wasn't just fighting. He was tracking, calculating, anticipating. Every step, every pivot carried the discipline of a soldier trained to kill in the dark. A legend walking. A gun slid across the dirt toward the drifter, kicked loose in the chaos. He snatched it up with trembling hands. A rider charged toward a group of townsfolk hiding under the bakery awning. The drifter raised the gun. His hand shook. He fired. The recoil nearly threw him backward, but the shot struck clean. The rider toppled, horse stumbling to a halt. The townsfolk stared at the drifter with wide, startled eyes. He swallowed hard and turned back to the fight. Craven realized too late that his men were falling faster than they could reload. He spurred his horse, tried to flee down the canyon road. Elias saw him. He sprinted across the street, boots hammering dirt, weaving through falling bodies and drifting smoke. He leapt at Craven's horse, grabbing the saddle horn, dragging the man off in a tangle of limbs and curses. They hit the ground hard. Craven fumbled for his knife. Elias caught his wrist and slammed it down. The razor glinted in Elias's other hand. Craven froze, eyes wide with terror. "Wait, don't." Elias brought the blade down, not to the throat, but to Craven's hand. A single, precise slice. Craven screamed as his trigger finger fell into the dust. Elias rose, breath steady, razor dripping red. "A man shouldn't die the way he lived," he said. "But he ought to lose what he used to harm others." The town gathered slowly, shaken, silent, staring at the man they thought was only a broken rancher. Elias wiped the blade, closed it, and handed it to the drifter. "Keep it," he said. "Let it teach you." Then he turned toward the rising sun, walking past the bodies, past the broken torches, past the fear that had held the town for years. The old storyteller's voice drifted like smoke. And that's how Hollow Bend came to know the truth. Elias Turner, frontier scout, rancher, ghost of a man, left with his past behind him. But legends, they don't stay gone. Not forever.